The words hit me like ice water. Nobody needs your money or you, Diane. My father's voice was calm, almost bored as he carved the turkey. My mother nodded, adding, "We've managed just fine before you started throwing cash around." My sister Jennifer smiled, chiming in, "Dad's right. Your generosity feels more like guilt than love." 20 family members sat around the table silent. I placed my fork down quietly, studying their faces. None of them knew what I'd discovered last week. The dining room felt suffocating, despite its spacious layout. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the mahogany table that could seat 24 people comfortably. Everyone continued eating as if nothing earth-shattering had just occurred. My cousin Amy reached for the cranberry sauce. Uncle Marcus helped himself to more stuffing. Aunt Helen complimented my mother's green bean casserole recipe. The normalcy of it all made my stomach turn. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my world was crumbling. For 8 long years, I had been the family's financial safety net. Every emergency, every crisis, every unexpected expense had somehow landed on my shoulders. When my parents faced foreclosure 3 years ago, I emptied my savings account and handed over $47,000 without hesitation. When Jennifer needed money for what she claimed were cancer treatments, I liquidated my retirement fund early, paying penalties just to get her the $63,000 she desperately needed. The list went on and on. Dad's car repairs after that mysterious accident. Mom's dental work that insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. Jennifer's husband, Bradley, losing his job and needing help with mortgage payments. Uncle Marcus's medical bills when he hurt his back. Each time they came to me with tearful eyes and trembling voices explaining how I was their only hope. Each time I believed them completely. I had given them everything, not just money, but pieces of my soul. I worked overtime, constantly took on extra clients, skipped vacations, lived in a modest apartment instead of buying the house I dreamed of. All so I could be there whenever my family needed me. I thought I was being a good daughter, a loving sister, a reliable family member. But last Tuesday changed everything. I had stopped by my parents' house to drop off some groceries. Mom had called the week before crying about how tight money was getting, how they could barely afford food. So naturally, I spent $300 at the organic market loading up on everything they liked. When I arrived, nobody was home, but I had a spare key. I let myself in to put the perishables in the refrigerator. That's when I saw my father's laptop open on the kitchen counter, still logged into his email account. I wasn't snooping, I was just moving it so I could set down the grocery bags. But the screen was showing his inbox, and the subject line of the top email made me freeze. Confirmation of booking 7-day Caribbean cruise February 14th through 21st. My heart started racing. A cruise. They had just asked me for help buying groceries, and they were booking a cruise that cost $4,800. I clicked on the email before I could stop myself. Premium balcony suite, specialty dining packages, spa treatments, all paid for in full. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more emails. Property tax payments that showed their house was completely paid off. Not facing foreclosure, not behind on payments, but owned free and clear. Investment account statements showing a balance of over $90,000. And then the one that nearly made me faint. A forwarded message from Jennifer with the subject line, Group Chat Archive Operation Golden Goose. I stared at that subject line for a full minute before clicking on it. What I read destroyed every assumption I had about my family, about my role in their lives, about everything I thought I knew. The message thread started 3 years ago. My parents, Jennifer, Bradley, Uncle Marcus, and Aunt Helen were all participants. They called it their Diane strategy sessions. They had analyzed my income, my spending habits, my emotional triggers. They knew exactly when I got my quarterly bonuses at work. They coordinated their emergencies to coincide with my most profitable months. Diane's Q4 bonus should be around $75,000 this year, Jennifer had written. Perfect timing for my medical emergency storyline. I've already researched the treatment costs to make it believable. Remember to really turn on the tears. Mom had added. She always cracks when we cry. The foreclosure angle worked perfectly last time, Dad chimed in. But we can't use that again. Maybe car trouble major repairs are expensive and harder for her to verify. They had spreadsheets, actual spreadsheets tracking how much money they had gotten from me categorized by type of emergency. Medical topped the list at $96,000. Home repairs came in second at $52,000. Car problems rounded out the top three at $31,000. At the bottom of the thread was a message that made my blood run cold. Annual Diane total $187,423 over 8 years. Target for this year $35,000 minimum. Family vacation fund is looking good, but we need to pace ourselves so she doesn't get suspicious. I had printed everything, every email, every message, every piece of evidence of their elaborate deception. Then I had gone home and cried for 6 straight hours. Now, sitting at their Thanksgiving table listening to them tell me that nobody needed my money, or me, I felt something shift inside my chest. The hurt was still there raw and bleeding, but something else was growing alongside it. Something that felt like steel. I took a small sip of wine and studied each face around the table. My father carving that turkey with the same steady hands that had forged documents to steal my grandmother's inheritance. My mother smiling warmly as she passed the potatoes, the same woman who had practiced her crying routine in the mirror before calling me about fake financial emergencies. Jennifer pregnant with her first child, the same sister who had faked cancer treatments while using my money for cosmetic surgery and luxury shopping sprees. Diane, my mother's voice broke through my thoughts. You've been awfully quiet. Everything all right, sweetheart? I looked up at her concerned expression, the same face she made when she was preparing to ask me for money. How had I never noticed how calculated it looked? How rehearsed? Everything's perfect, Mom, I said quietly. I'm just thinking about how grateful I am for family. The conversation flowed around me like background noise as my mind processed everything I had learned from David Walsh, the private investigator I had hired immediately after discovering that email thread. What he found was worse than anything I could have imagined. Uncle Marcus passed the gravy boat chatting about the Detroit Lions' latest game. He had no idea that I knew about the 3 rental properties he owned, generating $4,200 in monthly income. The medical bills he needed help with after his supposed back injury were actually down payments on investment real estate. His injury was real, but it happened while he was renovating one of his properties to increase its rental value. Aunt Helen complimented the table settings, her voice warm and familiar. She was completely unaware that I had documentation of her successful catering business, which had been operating under a different name for the past 5 years. Her husband's layoff that required $15,000 in emergency assistance had been fiction. She needed startup capital for expanding her business, and my money had funded the down payment on her commercial kitchen space. But the worst revelation was still coming. David had traced my grandmother Margaret's inheritance, the $85,000 that was supposed to come to me after she passed away 2 years ago. Grandmother Margaret had been my closest family member, the one person who truly understood my dreams of financial independence. She had saved for decades, living modestly so she could leave something meaningful for her granddaughter who worked so hard. I never received a penny of it. My parents had used a forged power of attorney document to redirect the entire inheritance into their own accounts. They told me the will was contested, that legal fees had eaten up most of the estate, that there was barely anything left after debts were settled. I believed them because they were my parents, because the idea that they would steal from their own daughter was unthinkable. The forged documents were sophisticated. David had found the original notary stamp that Bradley had stolen from his previous job at a law office. Yes, Bradley, my brother-in-law, who supposedly worked for a credit bureau helping people improve their scores. Another lie, he worked for a document forgery operation that served underground gambling networks and loan sharks. Jennifer shifted in her chair beside me, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. She had no idea that I knew her cancer treatments were actually a series of cosmetic procedures. breast augmentation, liposuction, facial contouring, professional teeth whitening. She had used my $63,000 to transform herself into someone completely different, then told everyone she had beaten cancer through experimental therapy. The medical bills she showed me were real, but they weren't for cancer treatment. David had tracked down the plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills who performed her procedures. Dr. Amanda Richardson's office had provided detailed records showing exactly what Jennifer had purchased with my money. The invoice included a 20% discretion fee for keeping the procedures confidential. "Diane, could you pass the salt?" Jennifer's voice was sweet, innocent. I handed her the salt shaker, studying her new face. The subtle changes were obvious now that I knew what to look for. Her nose was slightly different, her cheekbones more defined, her jawline sharper. How had I missed it before she had told me the cancer treatments might change her appearance due to medication side effects? I had been so concerned about supporting her through her illness that I never questioned the improvements to her features. My father cleared his throat, drawing my attention back to the head of the table. "Diane, your mother and I have been talking. We're so proud of how successful you've become in your career. That financial advisor position at Morrison & Associates is really working out for you." "Thank you, Dad," I replied carefully. "It's just that," he paused, glancing at my mother. "Well, we hope you remember that success is meant to be shared with family. Some people get so focused on their careers that they forget where they came from." My mother nodded sagely. "Money changes people, Diane. We've seen it happen. Children who become successful and then look down on their families, forgetting all the sacrifices their parents made for them." I felt my jaw clench, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of sacrifices are you referring to, Mom?" "Oh, sweetheart." She reached across the table to pat my hand. "We put you through college, supported you when you were starting your career, helped you become the woman you are today. We never asked for anything in return, but it would be nice to know that our investment in you was worthwhile." Investment. They called raising their daughter an investment, as if my existence was a business transaction designed to generate future returns. "No, speaking of investments," Dad continued, "we've been looking at some opportunities that could benefit the whole family. There's a chance for us to get involved in a real estate development project, but we need to move quickly. The window closes at the end of this month." Here it comes, I thought. The setup, the emotional manipulation designed to extract more money from their human ATM. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, genuinely curious to see how far they would push. Well, Dad looked uncomfortable. "It's a significant amount, $50,000. But Diane, this isn't just an expense. It's an investment that could pay dividends for years. We're talking about generational wealth here." $50,000, the same amount they had already secretly spent on their February cruise. They were asking me to fund their vacation while disguising it as an investment opportunity. "That is a lot of money, Dad," I said thoughtfully. "What kind of timeline would you need for a decision?" "Tonight would be ideal," he replied. "The developer is flying back to Phoenix tomorrow morning, and if we can't commit by then, the opportunity goes to someone else." My mother leaned forward earnestly. "Diane, we wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. This could set up your nephew or niece." She gestured toward Jennifer's belly. "For a secure future. Isn't that worth considering?" They were using the baby. Jennifer's unborn child was now a tool in their manipulation arsenal. I felt something inside me grow cold and sharp. "I'd need to see some documentation," I said. "As a financial advisor, I never recommend investments without proper due diligence. Could you show me the development plans, the financial projections, the legal contracts?" Dad's face flickered with something that might have been annoyance before smoothing back into paternal concern. "Sweetheart, sometimes you have to trust family. Not everything in life can be reduced to spreadsheets and contracts. This is about faith in each other." "Trust," I repeated softly. "Yes, that's very important in family relationships." What they didn't know was that David Walsh had uncovered something else, something that explained why they needed money so desperately despite their hidden assets and secret income streams. My family had a gambling problem, not just casual weekend poker games or occasional lottery tickets. They were deeply involved with underground gambling operations that ran high-stakes games in the back rooms of legitimate businesses. Over the past 3 years, they had lost over $95,000 to organized gambling rings operating out of Detroit. The real estate investment they were asking me to fund was actually money they owed to very dangerous people. People who had made it clear that failure to pay would result in serious consequences. Jennifer's husband, Bradley, wasn't just involved in document forgery. He was a courier for the gambling operation, which is how my family had gotten so deep into debt. He had convinced them that he could help them win big, that his inside knowledge of the games would give them an advantage. Instead, it had trapped them in a cycle of debt that grew larger every month. The irony was devastating. My family had been stealing from me to fund their addiction, and now their addiction was threatening their lives. They needed my money not for luxuries or investments, but to avoid being seriously hurt by loan sharks who were running out of patience. I looked around the table at all their faces, these people I had loved and trusted and supported for so many years. They had no idea that I knew about the threats, about the gambling, about any of it. They still saw me as their naive, generous Diane who would always come through with money whenever they needed it. But I wasn't that person anymore. That person had died last Tuesday when I read their Operation Golden Goose email thread. The woman sitting at this table now was someone entirely different. Someone who had evidence, someone who had a plan, someone who was about to change all their lives forever. "Excuse me," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "I need to use the bathroom." The conversation continued around my empty chair as I walked down the familiar hallway toward the guest bathroom. I had spent countless childhood hours in this house running through these same hallways, but everything felt different now. The family photos lining the walls seemed to mock me. There I was at graduation, beaming with pride while my parents flanked me on either side. There was Jennifer and me at the beach last summer, arms around each other, laughing at some joke I couldn't remember now. I locked the bathroom door and immediately pulled out my phone. The first call was to Sarah Chen, the attorney David Walsh had recommended. She answered on the second ring. "Sarah, it's Diane Morrison. They're asking for the money tonight. $50,000 for a fake real estate investment." Perfect. Sarah's voice was crisp and professional. "That's exactly what we needed. Are you recording?" "Voice memo app is running in my pocket," I confirmed. "I've got them asking for money under false pretenses, and I'm about to get them explaining the fake investment." "Sarah, there's something else. I think they're planning some kind of medical emergency tonight. My dad has been setting up for it all evening, complaining about chest tightness, rubbing his left arm. I think he's going to fake a heart attack to pressure me into giving them the money immediately." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Diane, that's healthcare fraud on top of everything else. If he goes through with faking a medical emergency, especially to extort money, we're looking at federal charges." "Good," I said, surprised by the hardness in my own voice. "What should I do?" "Document everything. If he fakes a collapse, don't call 911 immediately. Take his pulse, check his breathing. Make it clear to everyone that his vital signs are normal. If you expose the fake emergency in front of witnesses, their whole story falls apart." I ended the call and immediately dialed David Walsh. "David, I need you to contact Agent Rebecca Torres at the FBI. Tell her we're moving forward tonight. I want her team ready to move as soon as I give the signal." "Are you sure about this, Diane? Once we trigger the federal investigation, there's no going back. Your parents could face serious prison time." I thought about the forged inheritance documents, about Jennifer's fake cancer, about 8 years of emotional manipulation and financial theft, about the gambling debts that put everyone in danger. They made their choice, David. I'm just making sure there are consequences. My third call was to my bank's emergency fraud line. Within minutes, I had frozen my checking and savings accounts, moved my money to a new secured account at a different institution, and activated identity theft protection services. I also placed credit freezes on all my accounts through the three major reporting agencies. Whatever happened tonight, my family would never again have access to my money. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked older, somehow, wiser, but sadder. This wasn't how I had imagined spending Thanksgiving. This wasn't the family I thought I had. But it was the family I actually had, and it was time to stop pretending otherwise. I walked back toward the dining room but paused in the hallway when I heard Jennifer talking. "Mom, do you think she suspects anything? She's been really quiet tonight." "Don't be ridiculous," my mother's voice carried clearly. "Diane trusts us completely. She always has. That's her weakness, you know. She's too emotional, too giving. She can't see people for who they really are." "I still think we should wait," Uncle Marcus said. 50,000 is a lot to ask for all at once." "We don't have a choice." My father's voice was strained. "The deadline is real. If we don't pay by Friday, they're going to start breaking bones, and they won't start with me." "Don't even say that," Jennifer whispered, her voice suddenly frightened. "Bradley swore this would work. He said his contacts could help us win enough to pay everything back." "Bradley is an idiot," Dad snapped, "and now we're all paying for his stupidity." I pressed myself against the wall, hardly breathing. They had no idea I was listening. Their masks had completely slipped and they were talking about their real situation. "Look," Mom said firmly, "Diane has never said no to helping family. Not once in 8 years. We just need to present this right. Make it about the baby's future, about family legacy. She'll write the check without a second thought." "And if she doesn't?" Marcus asked. "She will," Dad said confidently. "And if she hesitates, I'll have my little medical episode. Chest pains, sweating the whole show. She'll panic and give us whatever we need to save me." Jennifer giggled nervously. "Dad, you're terrible, but it worked last time when you needed that car money." My heart stopped. Last time my father had faked a medical emergency before to get money from me, I thought back to 6 months ago when he had claimed to have severe chest pains during a family barbecue. I had been so frightened that I drove him to the hospital myself, crying the whole way. The doctors found nothing wrong, said it was probably stress or heartburn. Dad had been sheepish about it afterward, claiming he felt silly for overreacting. But later that week, he had asked me for $12,000 to repair his car after an accident. I had given it to him immediately, still shaken by his health scare. It had all been an act. I felt my phone buzz with a text message. I pulled it out and saw Bradley's name on the screen. But the message wasn't for me. "Family meeting tonight went perfectly. Target confirmed for emergency request. Medical backup plan ready if needed. Deadline is real, Friday, or consequences. Keep Diane calm until transfer complete." Bradley had accidentally sent the text to my number instead of Jennifer's. We were both in his contacts as family, and he must have selected the wrong one. Reading that text was like getting punched in the stomach and electrocuted at the same time. They had been planning this entire evening like a military operation. Every word, every gesture, every moment of apparent spontaneity had been carefully orchestrated to manipulate me into handing over $50,000. I screenshot the text and forwarded it to Sarah and David immediately. Then I took a deep breath, composed my face into an expression of concern, and walked back into the dining room. "Sorry about that," I said, settling back into my chair. My phone was buzzing with work emails. You know how it is. "Oh, sweetie," Mom said sympathetically. "You work too hard. You need to learn to disconnect, especially during family time." "You're absolutely right, Mom," I agreed, pulling my phone out and making a show of turning it to silent mode. What they couldn't see was that I was actually starting a new voice recording. Family should always come first. Dad smiled at me warmly. "Speaking of family, Diane, have you had a chance to think about that investment opportunity we mentioned?" "I have," I said carefully, "and I'd love to hear more details. $50,000 is a significant amount, so I want to make sure I understand exactly what we're investing in." "Of course," Dad said, his expression growing serious. It's a residential development project in the suburbs outside Grand Rapids. Luxury homes, family-oriented community. The developer is looking for private investors to fund the initial phase. That sounds wonderful, I said. Do you have any documentation I could review prospectus financial projections development timeline? Dad and Mom exchanged a quick glance. Well, Dad said, this is a more informal arrangement. The developer prefers to work with people he trusts, people who understand that sometimes the best opportunities don't come with traditional paperwork. I see, I nodded thoughtfully. And what kind of return are we looking at? Minimum 20% annually, Jennifer chimed in enthusiastically. Bradley has done all the research. This is the kind of opportunity that could set up our whole family for generations. 20% annually. Any legitimate financial advisor would know that was impossible in the current market without extreme risk. They were lying so blatantly that it was almost insulting. That's an exceptional return, I said, almost too good to be true. The best opportunities always seem that way, Dad said smoothly. That's why they're only available to people with vision. I was about to respond when Dad suddenly winced, pressing his hand to his chest. William, Mom's voice was full of immediate concern. What's wrong? I'm sure it's nothing, Dad said, but his face had gone pale. Just a little tightness in my chest, probably all this rich food. Jennifer leaned forward anxiously. Dad, are you okay? You look really pale. I'm fine, Dad insisted, but he was breathing heavily now, sweat forming on his forehead. Just need to sit back for a moment. The performance had begun. Every eye at the table focused on my father as he slumped slightly in his chair, his left hand clutching his chest while his right arm hung limply at his side. The timing was perfect, happening just as our conversation about the $50,000 investment was reaching the crucial moment. Should someone call 911? Aunt Helen asked, her voice high with panic. No, Dad protested weakly. I don't want to ruin Thanksgiving for everyone. It's probably just indigestion. But his breathing was labored now, and he was sweating profusely. Uncle Marcus stood up from his chair, looking around frantically. William, this doesn't look like indigestion. We need to get you to a hospital. Dad, please, Jennifer pleaded, her voice breaking with emotion. Don't try to be tough. If something happens to you because you were too stubborn to get help. My mother had moved to stand behind his chair, her hands on his shoulders. William, you're scaring me. We're calling an ambulance right now. Wait, I said quietly, standing up from my chair. Everyone turned to look at me. My voice had cut through their panic with an odd calmness that seemed completely inappropriate for the emergency unfolding before us. Dad, look at me, I said, walking around the table toward him. Can you tell me exactly what you're feeling? Diane, Mom protested. This isn't the time for questions. We need to call for help. In a moment, I replied, kneeling down beside my father's chair. Dad described the pain for me. He looked into my eyes, and for just a split second, I saw something flicker there. Uncertainty, confusion about why I wasn't panicking like everyone else. It's crushing, he gasped, like an elephant sitting on my chest, and my left arm feels numb. Classic heart attack symptoms. He had done his research, but I had done mine too. I'm going to check your pulse, I told him, reaching for his wrist. Diane, what are you doing? Jennifer demanded. He needs an ambulance, not an examination. I pressed my fingers against the pulse point on Dad's wrist. Strong, steady, regular rhythm. Exactly what I expected to find. I moved my fingers to his neck, checking his carotid pulse. Again, completely normal. Dad, I'm going to look at your eyes now, I said, gently lifting his eyelids. His pupils were normal size, reactive to light, no signs of distress. Honey, Mom said frantically, why aren't you calling for help? Can't you see he's having a heart attack? I stood up slowly, looking down at my father. The man who had taught me to ride a bicycle, who had walked me down the aisle at my college graduation, who had held me when I cried after my first heartbreak. The man who was now lying to my face about a medical emergency to steal $50,000 from me. He's not having a heart attack, I said clearly. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Complete silence followed, broken only by the sound of Dad's supposedly labored breathing. "What did you say?" Mom whispered. "I said he's not having a heart attack." I repeated, my voice growing stronger. "His pulse is strong and regular. His blood pressure is normal based on his skin color and capillary refill. His pupils are reactive and normal. His breathing, while dramatic, shows no signs of actual respiratory distress." Dad stared up at me with wide eyes, his performance faltering. "Diane," Jennifer said shakily, "you're not a doctor. How can you possibly know that?" "Because I've been trained to recognize medical emergencies," I replied. "I've been volunteering as an EMT for the past 2 years. I know what a real heart attack looks like, and this isn't it." The truth was that I had completed EMT training specifically because I wanted to be able to help people in crisis situations. Ironic that the first time I used those skills was to expose my father's lies. "You're wrong," Dad said, but his voice was stronger now, less gasping. "I know what I'm feeling." "Then let's call Dr. Rodriguez," I suggested. "He's been your family physician for 15 years. I'm sure he'd want to know about your cardiac event." I pulled out my phone and began dialing. Dad's face went completely white. "Diane, wait," he said quickly. "Don't bother Dr. Rodriguez on Thanksgiving. I'm starting to feel better. Maybe it was just a false alarm." False alarm? I looked around the table at my family members. "Uncle Marcus, didn't you just say Dad needed to get to a hospital and now it's a false alarm?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Well, if he's feeling better." "You know what's interesting?" I continued, my voice taking on a conversational tone that somehow made everyone more nervous than shouting would have. "Last spring, Dad had a similar episode during our barbecue. Remember chest pains, sweating, the whole dramatic scene. We rushed him to the emergency room, and the doctors found absolutely nothing wrong." "Stress can cause chest pain," Mom said defensively. "The doctors explained that." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Stress can mimic heart attack symptoms. The stress of lying, for example. The stress of trying to manipulate someone. That kind of stress can cause all sorts of physical symptoms." Dad slowly sat up straighter in his chair, his medical emergency apparently resolved. "Diane, I don't like your tone." "And I don't like being lied to," I replied evenly. "But here we are." Jennifer stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "What is wrong with you tonight? Dad was in pain, real pain, and you're acting like some kind of detective instead of a daughter." "You want to know what's wrong with me?" I asked, reaching into my purse. I pulled out the folder of documents David Walsh had prepared for me. Bank statements, email, printouts, property records, medical records. 8 years of lies documented in black and white. "What's wrong with me," I continued, placing the folder on the table, "is that I found out about Operation Golden Goose." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Mom gasped and took a step backward. Dad's face went ashen. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. Uncle Marcus looked confused, but Aunt Helen's eyes widened with recognition. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mom said weakly. "Really?" I opened the folder and pulled out the email printouts. "Because I have your message thread right here. 3 years of planning, coordination, and strategy sessions, all focused on extracting money from me through emotional manipulation and fabricated emergencies." I began reading from the papers in my hand. Jennifer's message from last October. "Diane's Q4 bonus should be around $75,000 this year. Perfect timing for my medical emergency storyline. I've already researched the treatment costs to make it believable." Jennifer sank back into her chair, her face completely drained of color. "Dad's response," I continued, "remember to really turn on the tears. She always cracks when we cry." I looked up at them, these people who had been systematically betraying me for years. Should I read more? Because there are pages and pages of this. Spreadsheets tracking how much money you've stolen from me. Plans for fake emergencies. Discussions about my weaknesses and how to exploit them. "Diane," Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I asked. Explain how you forged documents to steal my inheritance from grandmother Margaret. Explain how Jennifer used my money for plastic surgery while pretending to have cancer. Explain how you've been lying to me about everything for years. Uncle Marcus cleared his throat nervously. Diane, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Has there? I turned to look at him directly. Because my investigator found some interesting things about your rental properties too. 3 of them generating over $4,000 a month in income. But somehow you still needed $15,000 from me for medical bills. Marcus's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The only misunderstanding here, I said, my voice growing harder, is that I misunderstood who my family really was. I thought you were people who loved me. I thought when you came to me for help, you actually needed help. I thought we were a family. We are a family, Mom said desperately. Diane's sweetheart families help each other. That's what families do. Help each other, I repeated incredulously. Is that what you call stealing my grandmother's inheritance? Is that what you call 8 years of lies and manipulation? Is that what you call forging documents and identity theft? The room had gone completely silent except for the sound of Jennifer crying softly. Because that's what this is, I continued. Identity theft, mail fraud, financial elder abuse regarding grandmother's will, healthcare fraud from tonight's little performance. These aren't family disagreements. These are federal crimes. Dad tried to stand up, but his legs seemed shaky. Diane, you don't understand the pressure we've been under. What pressure? I demanded. And that's when Jennifer broke down completely. They're going to hurt us. Jennifer sobbed, her words tumbling out in a rush of panic and desperation. The people Bradley owes money to, they're not just loan sharks. They're dangerous, really dangerous. Jennifer, stop, Dad commanded, but his voice lacked authority now. No, I can't stop, Jennifer cried, standing up so quickly that her chair fell backward. I'm pregnant, Dad. I can't have my baby born into this nightmare. Diane deserves to know the truth. Mom reached for Jennifer's arm. Sweetheart, calm down. You're going to upset the baby. Upset the baby! Jennifer laughed hysterically. My baby is going to be born to parents who are in debt to organized crime figures. I think the baby is already upset. She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. Bradley isn't just a document forger, Diane. He's a courier for underground gambling operations. High-stakes poker games, sports betting, illegal casino operations. He convinced us that he had inside information that we could win big and solve all our money problems. Uncle Marcus dropped his head into his hands. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. How much do you owe them? I asked quietly. $95,437, Dad said, his voice hollow. As of yesterday. With interest accruing daily, Jennifer added, 20% compound interest per week. I felt my knees go weak. No wonder they were desperate. That kind of debt to dangerous people would double every month. So the $50,000 you wanted tonight, I said slowly, that was never for a real estate investment. It was a down payment, Mom admitted, to buy us more time to keep them from… She couldn't finish the sentence. From breaking your legs, Aunt Helen said bluntly. Everyone turned to stare at her. What we all know what these people do. Marcus told me everything last week. Marcus glared at his wife. You weren't supposed to say anything. I wasn't supposed to say anything? Helen stood up, her voice rising. Our family is mixed up with criminals, and I'm supposed to keep quiet about it. How long? I asked. How long have you been lying to me about needing money? 8 years, Dad said quietly. No, I shook my head. How long have you been gambling? Jennifer wiped her nose on her sleeve. The gambling started about 4 years ago, but the debt with these particular people started 18 months ago. And before that, I pressed. Before that, we were just taking advantage of your generosity, Mom said, unable to meet my eyes. You made good money, you seemed happy to help, and we needed things. You needed things, I repeated. Like what? The house renovations, Dad admitted. New cars, the boat, Jennifer's wedding. My wedding cost $43,000, Jennifer said quietly. You paid for most of it. You told me you had savings, I said. We did have savings, Mom replied, but we wanted to keep our savings and use your money instead. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. They had savings, but they decided to lie to me and take my money instead because it was easier. The inheritance, I said. Grandmother's $85,000. Dad looked sick. We needed it for the gambling debts. By the time she died, we were already in deep with these people. So you forged legal documents to steal money that was specifically left to me. We were going to pay you back, he protested weakly. With what money? I demanded. You just told me you owe almost $100,000 to loan sharks. We thought we could win it back, Jennifer said. Bradley kept saying he had a system that he knew when the games were rigged in the house's favor. Bradley is an idiot, Uncle Marcus said bitterly, and now we're all going to pay for it. I turned to look at him. How many people are involved in this? All of us, Aunt Helen said. Marcus and I put up our house as collateral for part of the debt. Your house? I stared at them in disbelief. $28,000 against the house, Marcus confirmed. We thought it was a sure thing. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed. My entire family had been systematically lying to me, stealing from me, and using me to fund their gambling addiction. And now they were all in danger from actual criminals. Who else knows about this? I asked. Just the people in this room, Dad said, and Bradley. Where is Bradley tonight? Jennifer's face crumpled again. He's meeting with them, the loan sharks, trying to negotiate more time. What happens if they say no? Nobody answered, but the silence was deafening. What happens if they say no? I repeated, my voice harder. They start with broken bones, Jennifer whispered. Fingers first, then hands, then arms. And if you still don't pay... She couldn't finish the sentence. They kill you, I said. Not usually, Dad said quickly. Usually they just make you disappear, sell you to people who need workers in other countries. Human trafficking. My family was mixed up with people who engaged in human trafficking. I pulled out my phone and started dialing. Who are you calling? Mom asked frantically. The FBI, I said. No, Dad lunged for my phone, but I stepped away. Diane, you can't. If they find out we talked to law enforcement, they'll kill all of us, including you. Including my baby, Jennifer added desperately. Please, Diane, I know we've done terrible things to you, but please don't get my baby killed. I stopped dialing and looked around the table at their terrified faces. These people had betrayed me in every possible way, but they were still my family, and now they were in genuine danger. How much time do you have? I asked. They want the $50,000 by Friday, Mom said. That gives us until tomorrow night. And if you can't pay, they start collecting on the collateral, Dad said, beginning with Marcus and Helen's house, then moving on to physical consequences. I thought about the baby growing inside Jennifer's belly, about Uncle Marcus and Aunt Helen losing their home because of other people's gambling addiction, about my parents who had lied to me and stolen from me but who were still my parents. I have a different idea, I said slowly. But it's going to require you to trust me completely. And it's going to require you to face the legal consequences of what you've done. What kind of legal consequences? Jennifer asked fearfully. I pulled out my phone again, but this time I showed them the screen. A text conversation with someone named David Walsh. David is a private investigator, I explained. For the past week, he's been gathering evidence of your crimes. Bank fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, document forgery, all federal offenses. Dad's face went white. Diane, no! But I continued. David also has contacts with law enforcement agencies that specialize in organized crime, people who can protect witnesses and their families. Witness protection? Marcus asked. If you agree to testify against the gambling operation, if you provide evidence about their money laundering and illegal betting networks, the FBI can keep you safe from retaliation. And in exchange, Mom asked, in exchange, you face reduced sentences for your crimes against me, probably probation and restitution instead of prison time. Jennifer looked around the table desperately. What about the baby? Witness protection includes family members, I said. Your child would be safe. Dad shook his head. Diane, you don't understand. These people have connections everywhere. Law enforcement, judges, prosecutors. They'll find us no matter where we hide. Not if they're all in prison, I replied. David tells me the FBI has been trying to build a case against this organization for 3 years. They need inside witnesses, people who can provide direct evidence of the illegal gambling operations. I stood up and looked around the table one more time. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Bradley and tell him to come here immediately. When he arrives, we're all going to sit down with FBI agents, and you're going to tell them everything. Every game you attended, every bet you placed, every person you met, every location you visited. And if we refuse, Dad asked, then I call the FBI anyway and report the federal crimes you committed against me. You go to prison for up to 15 years each, and you still owe the loan sharks nearly $100,000. The room was silent for a long moment. Bradley will never agree to this, Jennifer said finally. Then Bradley goes to prison and you get a divorce. I replied, your choice. Jennifer stared at me for a moment, then slowly reached for her phone. 23 minutes later, Bradley burst through the front door, his face flushed with panic and anger. He hadn't even taken off his coat before he started yelling. What the hell is wrong with all of you? I told you never to discuss business around other people. And why is Diane here? This was supposed to be family only. Diane is family, Jennifer said quietly. Not for this conversation, she isn't, Bradley snapped. He turned to glare at me. You need to leave, right now. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse again. I think you're the one who needs to hear something. I pulled out my phone and held it up so everyone could see the screen. A text message from Bradley's phone number sent 37 minutes ago. Family meeting tonight went perfectly. Target confirmed for emergency request. Medical backup plan ready if needed. Deadline is real, Friday or consequences. Keep Diane calm until transfer complete. Bradley's face went white as he stared at his own words on my phone. You sent this to my number by mistake, I explained calmly. You meant to send it to Jennifer, but you selected the wrong contact. That's not what it looks like, Bradley said desperately. Really? I stood up and walked toward him. Because it looks like evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. It looks like proof that tonight's entire dinner was a setup designed to manipulate me into giving you $50,000. Bradley backed toward the door. I'm leaving. Jennifer, we're going home. Now. No, we're not, Jennifer said, her voice stronger than I had heard it all evening. Excuse me. I said we're not leaving, Jennifer repeated, standing up slowly. And neither are you. Bradley started to turn toward the door, but it opened before he could reach it. 3 people in dark suits walked into the dining room. The woman in front held up a badge. FBI, she announced. Agent Rebecca Torres, Financial Crimes Division. Mr. Bradley Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and racketeering. What? Bradley spun around to stare at me accusingly. You called the FBI. I called them a week ago, I replied, when I first discovered what you people had been doing to me. 2 male agents moved to either side of Bradley as Agent Torres began reading him his rights. The rest of my family sat frozen at the dining table, watching their carefully constructed world collapse in real time. Mrs. Morrison, Agent Torres addressed Jennifer. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning. Given your pregnancy and the circumstances, we've arranged for you to speak with our agents at a secure location with medical personnel standing by. Questioning about what? Jennifer asked. Your involvement in the gambling operation, the document forgery, and the systematic fraud committed against your sister. Jennifer looked at me with wide, frightened eyes. Diane, what did you tell them? I told them the truth, I said simply. Every detail, every crime, every lie. They have copies of all the evidence David collected, plus recordings of tonight's conversation. Recordings. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and stopped the voice memo app that had been running since I returned from the bathroom. 4 hours and 17 minutes of recordings, including your fake heart attack, the confession about the gambling debts, and Bradley's admission that this entire evening was orchestrated fraud. Agent Torres nodded to her colleagues, and they began escorting Bradley toward the door. He was handcuffed now, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. "Jennifer, don't say anything to them," he called over his shoulder. "Call a lawyer, don't trust Diane." "Don't trust Diane," Jennifer repeated incredulously. "You're the one who got us into this mess. You're the one who promised us we could win big. You're the one who put my baby in danger." The agents paused at the doorway as Agent Torres pulled out a folder. "Before we go," she said, looking around the table, "I want everyone to understand something. The gambling organization you've been involved with has been under federal investigation for 3 years. We know about the money laundering, the illegal betting operations, and the loan sharking. What we needed was inside witnesses." She opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. These are surveillance photos taken over the past 18 months. Mr. Bradley Morrison entering and leaving illegal gambling locations. Mr. William Morrison at a high-stakes poker game in a warehouse outside Detroit. Mrs. Jennifer Morrison picking up cash payments from a sports betting operation. She spread the photos on the table. My family stared at images of themselves committing federal crimes. "We already have enough evidence to prosecute everyone in this room," Agent Torres continued. "The question is whether you want to cooperate and receive consideration for your assistance, or whether you want to fight this and face the maximum penalties." "What kind of consideration?" Dad asked weakly. "Full cooperation, including testimony against the gambling organization's leadership, could result in reduced charges. Fraud instead of racketeering. Probation instead of 15-year prison sentences. Witness protection for family members who are genuinely in danger." "And Diane," Mom asked, "what happens to the money we took from her?" "Full restitution is required regardless," Agent Torres replied. "But if you cooperate, we can arrange payment plans that don't require selling your primary residence." Uncle Marcus raised his hand tentatively, like a student asking a question in class. "What about our house? We put it up as collateral." "The gambling operation's assets are being frozen as we speak," Agent Torres said. "That includes any collateral they're holding. Your house will be released back to you within 72 hours. Aunt Helen started crying with relief. "Agent Torres," I said, "what about the immediate threat they still owe money to dangerous people?" "The arrests began 2 hours ago," she replied. 17 members of the organization are already in custody, including the leadership. There's no longer an immediate threat to your family's safety." I felt something inside my chest loosen for the first time in a week. My family was safe, even if they were about to face serious legal consequences for their actions. "I need answers from each of you," Agent Torres continued. "Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, you'll come with Agent Davis. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Morrison, you'll speak with Agent Williams. Mrs. Jennifer Morrison, as I mentioned, you'll have a separate interview with medical support." "What about Diane?" Jennifer asked. "Ms. Morrison is the primary victim and the cooperating witness who made this investigation possible," Agent Torres said. "She's free to go home." As the agents began organizing my family members for transport, Jennifer approached me hesitantly. "Diane," she said quietly, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." I looked at her face, still beautiful despite the tears and smudged makeup. My sister, who had pretended to have cancer to steal my money for plastic surgery. My sister, who was carrying my niece or nephew. My sister, who had been trapped in an increasingly dangerous situation by her husband's stupidity and greed. "I know you are," I said, "and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean there won't be consequences." "I understand," she nodded. "Will you Will you be there for the baby after everything? I thought about that question for a long moment. Could I love a child whose parents had betrayed me so thoroughly? Could I separate an innocent baby from the crimes of its family? Yes, I said finally. I'll be there for the baby. Jennifer hugged me then suddenly and desperately whispering, "Thank you," over and over against my shoulder. As my family was led away by federal agents, I stood alone in my parents' dining room. The Thanksgiving dinner was still spread across the table, cold and untouched now. The crystal glasses still held wine. The turkey my father had carved while explaining that nobody needed my money was still sitting on its platter. I walked through the house one more time, looking at the family photos that lined the hallways. There would be new photos after this, I realized. Prison photos, court photos, witness protection photos. Nothing would ever be the same. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. 6 months later, I stood in the nursery of Jennifer's new apartment, holding my 3-week-old niece, Emma Rose Morrison. She was perfect in the way that all babies are perfect, with tiny fingers that gripped mine and dark eyes that seemed to see straight into my soul. "She likes you," Jennifer said from her rocking chair. She looked different now, older somehow, but also more real than she had looked in years. The artificial enhancements from her cosmetic surgeries had been surgically reversed as part of her restitution agreement. The face looking back at me was the sister I remembered from childhood. "How are the classes going?" I asked, gently rocking Emma. "Good," Jennifer replied. "Really good. The financial literacy program is harder than I expected, but I'm learning so much about budgeting and responsible spending. And the addiction counseling is helping me understand how we got so deep into the gambling." Jennifer had entered witness protection after providing detailed testimony about the gambling organization's operations. Bradley was serving a 7-year federal sentence for racketeering and document forgery. Jennifer had filed for divorce while he was awaiting trial. "I got accepted into the nursing program," she added. "Classes start in the fall." "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. Jennifer had always been good at taking care of people, but she had never had the discipline to pursue a career before. The structure of witness protection combined with her genuine desire to change her life had given her opportunities she never would have had otherwise. My parents were serving 18 months in minimum security federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. They had lost their house, their cars, and most of their possessions to restitution payments. But they were alive, and they were learning to live without the gambling addiction that had controlled their lives for so many years. Uncle Marcus and Aunt Helen had received probation and community service. Their house had been returned to them as promised. They were attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings together and had started a small business providing financial counseling to other families affected by gambling addiction. They sent me cards every month updating me on their progress and thanking me for giving them a chance to change. I handed Emma back to Jennifer and walked to the window of her apartment. It was a modest place in a secure building paid for by the Federal Witness Protection Program. Not luxurious, but safe and clean and honest. "Diane," Jennifer said softly, "I need to ask you something." "What is it?" "Do you think Emma will ever be able to have a relationship with her father?" I turned to look at my sister, this woman who had hurt me so deeply, but who was working so hard to become someone better. "I think that depends on whether Bradley chooses to become someone worthy of having a relationship with her," I said carefully, "and that's not something you can control." Jennifer nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I want her to have a better life than we gave her. I want her to grow up knowing what real love looks like, not manipulation or lies or taking advantage of people." "She'll learn that from watching you," I said. "From watching how you treat people now, how you live your life now." I sat down in the chair across from Jennifer's rocking chair. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "I'm getting married." Jennifer's eyes widened with surprise and joy. "David," I nodded, smiling. David Walsh, the private investigator who had helped me uncover my family's deception, had become so much more than a professional contact over the past 6 months. He was patient and honest and kind, everything I had thought I wanted in a family but had never actually experienced. When? Jennifer asked. Next month, a small ceremony, just close friends. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then asked the question I had been expecting. Will any of the family be there? You, I said, if you want to be. Really? She started crying. Then not the manipulative tears I had seen so many times before, but real tears of gratitude and relief. You're my sister, I said simply. You made terrible choices, but you're working to make better ones. That matters to me. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, listening to Emma's soft breathing as she slept in her mother's arms. I started a nonprofit organization, I told Jennifer. What kind? Financial fraud victim services. We help people who have been scammed or defrauded by family members. It's more common than you might think. Jennifer winced. How common? Financial abuse by family members affects about 6 million Americans every year, I said. Most of them never report it because they don't want their relatives to go to prison. Like you could have done with us. Like I could have done with you, I agreed. Why didn't you just turn us in and walk away? I thought about that question for a long moment. It was something I had asked myself many times over the past 6 months. Because justice isn't the same thing as revenge, I said finally. Justice means holding people accountable for their actions and giving them opportunities to make things right. Revenge would have been letting the loan sharks hurt you and then walking away. The nonprofit, Jennifer said, what do you do for the victims? Financial counseling, legal assistance, emotional support. We help them recover their money when possible, but more importantly, we help them rebuild their sense of trust and self-worth. Do they ever forgive their families? Some do, some don't. Both choices are valid. Jennifer shifted Emma to her other arm. What made the difference for you? Why did you choose to forgive us? I didn't forgive you immediately, I said honestly. It took months of therapy and a lot of soul-searching. I had to learn the difference between forgiving someone and allowing them to continue hurting me. What's the difference? Forgiveness is something I do for myself to let go of anger and resentment that was poisoning my own life. But boundaries are something I do to protect myself from future harm. What boundaries did you set with us? No unsupervised access to my financial information. No requests for money ever. Complete honesty about your circumstances and your progress. And if anyone in the family ever lies to me again about anything significant, I walk away permanently. Jennifer nodded seriously. Those seem like reasonable boundaries. They are, and so far everyone has respected them. A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Jennifer looked through the peephole and opened the door to reveal David holding a bag of groceries and wearing the gentle smile that had first attracted me to him. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but I brought the things you needed for Emma's feeding schedule. Thank you, Jennifer said, accepting the bag. You didn't have to do that. Emma's my niece too, David replied simply. Of course I had to. It was true. David had embraced not just me, but the complicated reality of my family situation. He attended Jennifer's court hearings, visited my parents in prison, and helped Uncle Marcus and Aunt Helen set up their financial counseling business. He understood that loving me meant accepting all the broken pieces of my life and helping me put them back together in healthier ways. I should go, I said, standing up. Emma needs her nap, and you have that appointment with your probation officer. Jennifer walked me to the door, Emma still sleeping in her arms. Diane, she said as I was leaving, what you did that night calling the FBI, forcing us to face consequences, it was the most loving thing anyone has ever done for our family. How do you figure that? Because it saved our lives. All of our lives. If you had just given us the $50,000, we would have kept gambling, kept lying, kept digging ourselves deeper. Bradley would have convinced us he could win it all back, and eventually those loan sharks would have killed us. She was right. The painful intervention that night had been the only way to break the cycle of lies and addiction that was destroying everyone I cared about. Sometimes love looks like tough choices, I said. Will you teach Emma that? Jennifer asked. When she's old enough to understand, I'll teach her that real love doesn't demand payment, I said. I'll teach her that people who truly care about you don't lie to you or manipulate you or use you. I'll teach her that she has value beyond what she can give to other people. And forgiveness. I'll teach her that forgiveness is possible, but it requires genuine change from the person who hurt you. And I'll teach her that protecting herself isn't mean or selfish. I hugged my sister goodbye, kissed my niece's forehead, and walked out into the bright spring afternoon. David was waiting by his car, and we drove toward the downtown office where my nonprofit organization was housed. "How's Jennifer doing?" he asked as we navigated traffic. "Better," I said. "Really better. She's learning to live without lies, and it suits her." "And how are you doing?" I considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I had discovered that everything I believed about my family was false. I had learned that the people I loved most had been systematically betraying me for years. I had watched them get arrested, seen them face serious legal consequences, watched our family structure completely collapse. But I had also learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined. I had learned that standing up for myself didn't make me a bad person. I had learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. I had learned that sometimes the most difficult choices lead to the most healing outcomes. "I'm doing well," I told David. "For the first time in years, I'm doing really well." That evening, I sat at my computer working on a presentation for the annual conference of financial crime investigators. The title of my speech was, "When Family Becomes the Enemy Recognizing and Responding to Financial Abuse by Relatives." I had been invited to speak because my case had become something of a landmark in federal financial crime prosecution. The evidence I provided had led to the dismantling of an entire criminal organization. The techniques David and I developed for documenting financial abuse were now being taught to law enforcement agencies across the country. But more importantly, I was speaking because I wanted other victims to know they weren't alone. I wanted them to understand that protecting yourself from people who claim to love you isn't selfish or cruel. I wanted them to know that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to hold them accountable for their actions. As I worked on my presentation, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's name. She was allowed one supervised phone call per week from prison. "Hi, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well. How are you?" "I'm okay. The classes here are helpful. I never realized how much damage our gambling had done not just to us, but to everyone around us." My mother sounded different on these calls, clearer somehow, more present. The woman who had spent years planning emotional manipulations was learning to have actual conversations. "Mom, I want to ask you something." "What is it?" "Do you remember what you said to me that night at Thanksgiving dinner about nobody needing my money or me?" There was a long pause. "Yes, I remember." "Did you mean it?" Another pause, longer this time. At the time, I thought I did. I was angry and scared and desperate. I convinced myself that you were using money to control us, that your generosity was somehow selfish. And now I realize that I was the one being selfish. You were trying to love us the only way you knew how, and we were taking advantage of that love. I'm sorry, Diane. I'm sorrier than I know how to express. "Thank you," I said. "That means something to me. Will you visit us when we get out? If you stay clean, if you keep working the program, if you continue being honest with me, then yes, we can rebuild our relationship slowly. And if we don't, then I'll love you from a distance, but I won't let you hurt me again." "That's fair," Mom said quietly. "That's more than fair." After we hung up, I returned to my presentation. The last slide contained a quote that had become my personal motto over the past 6 months. Real family doesn't demand payment for love. When people show you who they truly are through their actions, believe them. But also remember that protecting yourself doesn't mean abandoning compassion for those genuinely trying to change. Below that, I had written my closing thoughts. The hardest lesson I learned from my experience is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. Demanding honesty isn't cruel. Protecting yourself from financial abuse isn't unforgiving. Love without accountability isn't love at all. It's codependency disguised as devotion. But here's what I also learned: people can change. Families can heal. Trust can be rebuilt. It takes time, patience, consistent action, and sometimes legal intervention. But it's possible. The question isn't whether you should forgive people who have financially abused you. The question is whether they have done the work to become worthy of your trust again. And that's a question only you can answer. As I finished my presentation, I thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib across town. She would grow up knowing a different kind of family love than the one I had experienced. She would learn that people who care about you don't lie to you or manipulate you. She would understand that her value as a person had nothing to do with how much money she could provide to others. And if anyone ever tried to take advantage of her kindness or exploit her generosity, she would have the tools to recognize it and the strength to stop it. That knowledge made all the pain of the past 6 months worth it. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve relationships built on honesty, respect, and genuine care. Never settle for less than that, no matter who is asking you to compromise your boundaries. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.